The applause began before Daniel understood what was happening. It rose like a wave, loud and bright, filling the glass-walled auditorium with celebration. He stood behind the black curtain, clutching his tablet, waiting for his name to be called. His heart was racing, but it was the good kind of fear, the kind that comes before a dream unfolds. Months of work had led to this moment. Long nights, missed dinners, endless revisions. He had told himself it would all be worth it when the board saw his vision. Then he heard a name, Ethan Cole. The crowd cheered again, even louder this time. Daniel frowned. That wasn't right. Ethan was presenting later in the quarter. Daniel leaned forward slightly, peeking through the edge of the curtain. Ethan walked onto the stage with easy confidence, adjusting his jacket as if the spotlight belonged to him. Then the first slide appeared on the massive screen. Daniel stopped, breathing. It was his design, the same color palette, the same tagline, even the small graphic flaw in the lower corner that he had planned to fix that morning. His mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. This had to be a mistake. Maybe Ethan was introducing him. Maybe this was some kind of surprise collaboration. Ethan smiled at the board members seated in the front row. This project, he began, his voice steady and warm, has been my focus for the past year. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest. My focus. The words echoed, sharp and cold. Daniel's fingers tightened around his tablet until his knuckles turned white. He watched as Ethan clicked through the slides, explaining the strategy Daniel had carefully built from scratch. The market analysis, the projected growth model, the risk mitigation plan. Every detail delivered smoothly, as if Ethan had lived inside those ideas for months, but he hadn't. Daniel had just 2 weeks ago. Daniel had invited Ethan over to his apartment. He had needed feedback before presenting to the board. Ethan was his closest friend at the company. They had started on the same day 5 years ago, two ambitious graduates trying to prove themselves in a competitive firm. They had shared cheap lunches, late-night brainstorming sessions, and quiet promises that one day they would lead the company together. Daniel remembered that night clearly. Ethan had sat at his kitchen table, leaning forward with interest as Daniel explained his concept. This is it, Ethan had said, eyes shining. This is the breakthrough. Daniel had laughed, relieved. You really think so? I know so. You've outdone yourself. That memory now felt like a trap. On stage, Ethan paused for effect, letting the audience absorb the impact of the financial forecast. The board members nodded, impressed. Few even smiled at each other. Daniel recognized that look. It was the look of approval. It's the look of promotion. His promotion. Except it wasn't his anymore. The applause hit again when Ethan finished. A standing ovation. Cameras flashing. The CEO himself walked up to shake Ethan's hand. Daniel felt like he was watching someone else's life unfold. His ears rang. His body felt distant, heavy, and hollow at the same time. Someone backstage touched his shoulder. Daniel, you're up next. He couldn't speak. I think there's been a change, he managed. The assistant frowned at her clipboard. Oh, yes. Your slot was removed this morning, didn't you know? Ethan said you agreed to push your presentation to next quarter. Daniel stared at her. Push to next quarter. He shook his head slowly. No, I didn't agree to that. But Ethan had clearly planned this carefully. Quietly, Daniel walked out of the backstage area before anyone could stop him. The hallway felt too narrow, the lights too bright. His mind replayed every conversation he'd had with Ethan over the past month, the casual questions, the requests to review drafts, the way Ethan had insisted on seeing the final version the night before the summit. I just want to support you. Ethan had said, support. Daniel stepped outside the building, the cold air hitting his face like a wake-up call. The city moved. Around him, unaware that his world had just shifted, cars passed. People crossed the street. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. Inside the auditorium, Ethan was probably celebrating. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. There it was, a text from Ethan sent early that morning. Big day. Proud of you. No matter what happens. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. No matter what happens. The betrayal wasn't loud. There had been no shouting, no confrontation. It had been smooth and strategic. Ethan hadn't attacked him. He had simply stepped into his place and closed the door behind him. Hours later, when the event ended, Daniel waited in the lobby. He needed answers, not rumors, not assumptions. The truth. Ethan appeared surrounded by colleagues, all congratulating him. He looked relaxed, almost glowing under the attention. When he spotted Daniel, his smile faltered for a split second. Then it returned, controlled and careful. "Give us a minute," Ethan told the group. They drifted away. Daniel didn't waste time. "You used my project." Ethan sighed softly, as if this conversation were inconvenient. "Daniel, don't." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "You presented my work." Ethan studied him. There was no panic in his expression. No apology either. "You weren't ready," Ethan said finally. The words landed harder than Daniel expected. "Excuse me? Hesitate?" Ethan continued. "You overthink. The board doesn't reward hesitation. They reward action. It wasn't yours to act on. It was sitting in your laptop," Ethan replied evenly. "Ideas don't matter unless someone moves them forward." Daniel stared at him, searching for some sign of regret. He found none. "You could have told me," Daniel said, "so we could have presented together." Ethan shook his head. "The company needed one clear leader, not two voices. And you decided that should be you. I decided I wouldn't let an opportunity slip away." There it was. The truth stripped of excuses. Daniel realized then that Ethan didn't see this as betrayal. In his mind, he had made a practical decision. A bold move. The kind leaders make. "You were my friend," Daniel said quietly. Ethan's expression softened slightly. "I am your friend." "No," Daniel replied. "You're not." Silence stretched between them. For a brief moment, something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Doubt, perhaps. But it disappeared quickly. "This is how the world works," Ethan said. "You'll understand someday." Daniel felt the weight of those words settle into his chest. It wasn't just about a project, it was about values, about trust, about the quiet agreement between two people who believed they were building something together. Ethan had chosen ambition over loyalty, and he believed he was right. Daniel walked away without another word. He didn't trust himself to speak. That night he sat alone in his apartment, staring at the original files on his computer. The timestamps proved everything. The early drafts, the research notes, the voice recordings where he brainstormed alone. In the dark, he thought about reporting Ethan immediately. He could forward the evidence to the board. He could demand recognition. But another feeling rose inside him. Stronger than anger? It was humiliation. He had trusted the wrong person. He had opened his work, his vision, his future to someone who saw it as an opportunity to climb. Daniel replayed. There are years of friendship in his mind. It's the shared coffee breaks, the inside jokes. It's the promises that they would always have each other's backs. Had any of it been real? Or had Ethan always been calculating? The questions cut deeper than the theft itself. As midnight passed, Daniel's sadness began to shift. The hurt hardened into something sharper, more focused. The shock faded, replaced by clarity. Ethan had taken his work. He had taken his moment. But he hadn't taken his ability. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear the applause in his head. It no longer sounded like celebration. It sounded like a challenge. The betrayal had changed something in him. It had stripped away his comfort, his blind trust. It forced him to see the world differently, not as a place where talent alone wins, but as a place where choices matter. And Ethan had made his choice. Now, Daniel would have to decide what to do with the pain that choice created. Outside, the city lights flickered against the dark sky. Inside, Daniel closed his laptop slowly. This wasn't the end of this story. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Daniel stopped sleeping well after the summit. He would close his eyes and see the screen glowing behind Ethan, hear the applause rising like a storm. Each memory pressed harder than the last. The hurt was no longer sharp. It was steady, heavy. It followed him to work, sat beside him in meetings, stared back at him from every reflective surface in the office. Ethan had settled into his new role quickly. He moved into the corner office with glass walls and a city view. People knocked before entering. His calendar filled up weeks in advance. He walked the halls with calm confidence, thanking teams, shaking hands, acting like nothing had been broken. Daniel watched quietly. He didn't confront him again. Not yet. Instead, he observed. He began gathering everything. Every draft he had ever created. Every saved version with timestamps. Emails where he had shared outlines with Ethan. Messages where Ethan praised specific ideas weeks before the summit. He built a private folder on his laptop and named it one. Simple word, truth. The process gave him focus. Each document was a reminder that he wasn't imagining things, though proof existed, clear and solid. Still, every night he wrestled with himself. One voice pushed him forward. Send it. Expose him. Let the board see who he really is. Another voice asked harder questions. What happens after? Will it fix anything? Will it give you peace? Daniel tried to picture the outcome. The board calling. Ethan in for questioning. The shock on his face. The silence spreading through the office as rumors exploded. Ethan losing the title he had just gained. Watching him walk out with a box of belongings. The image gave Daniel a quick surge of satisfaction. Then it faded. Because he also imagined something else. The office divided into camps. People whispering his name with suspicion. Some calling him brave, others calling him bitter. He imagined being known not for his talent, but for taking someone down. He didn't want that to be his legacy. One evening, long after most employees had left, Daniel stayed behind, staring at the skyline from his desk. He heard footsteps in the hallway and looked up. Ethan, for a second, they just stood there. You're still here, Ethan said. So, are you? Daniel replied. Ethan stepped inside, closing the glass door behind him. Without the usual crowd around him, he looked different. The sharp edges were softer. The confidence slightly forced. You've been distant, Ethan said, carefully. Daniel let out a short breath. That surprises you. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I did what I believed was necessary. You might not agree, but I didn't do it to hurt you. That's exactly what you did. Silence filled the room. I saw potential, Ethan continued. I knew if I didn't act, someone else would. You were waiting for the perfect moment. In this company, there is no perfect moment. Daniel studied him. Ethan wasn't lying. Kay truly believed speed mattered more than loyalty. In his mind, this was strategy, not betrayal. You could have told me, Daniel said quietly. And risked you saying no? Ethan asked. You would have held it back. It wasn't an insult. It was an honest assessment. Daniel did hesitate. He refined. He polished. He wanted things right. Ethan wanted things first. The difference between them now felt massive. After Ethan left, Daniel opened his laptop again. The folder stared back at him. Truth. He drafted an email to the board. Clear, professional, factual. He attached 3 key documents that proved the timeline of creation. He read it twice. It was strong, direct, hard to ignore. His finger hovered over the send button. He thought about the years they had built side by side. The shared ambition, the trust that once felt unbreakable. He also thought about the version of himself he wanted to become. Was revenge strength? Or was it just reaction? Daniel closed the email without sending it. The next morning, he made a different choice. Instead of exposing Ethan immediately, he requested a meeting with a senior board member. Ms. Alvarez, someone known for valuing integrity over politics. In her office, he didn't accuse. He didn't attack. He simply asked a question. What defines ownership here? He said, speed or creation. She looked at him carefully, sensing more beneath the words. Innovation requires trust. She replied, without it, success doesn't last. That sentence stayed with him. Success doesn't last. Daniel left her office with a new idea forming. Maybe revenge wasn't about destruction. Maybe it was about endurance. He went home and opened a blank document. He began rebuilding his concept from the ground up. Not copying the original, but improving it, strengthening weak spots, sharpening the strategy, expanding the scope. If Ethan had taken version 1, Daniel would create version 2, better, stronger, undeniable. The anger inside him shifted. It no longer burned wildly. It focused like a beam, still. The evidence folder remained on his laptop. He hadn't forgiven Ethan. He hadn't forgotten. He was simply choosing his battlefield carefully. Every step. Forward now carried weight. Every decision felt deliberate. The desire for revenge still whispered at night, tempting him with quick justice. But Daniel began to understand something important. There are two ways to respond to betrayal. You can pull someone down, or you can rise so high that the betrayal becomes small in comparison. He hadn't made his final choice yet. But he was getting closer. The leadership summit arrived on a cold morning, sharp and bright. The lobby buzzed with energy. Executives, managers, investors, all gathered under one roof to celebrate growth and vision. Ethan's face was printed on banners near the entrance. Innovation through bold action. The headline read. Daniel stood near the back of the main hall, hands in his coat pockets, watching people greet Ethan with admiration. The applause came easily now. Too easily. Success had wrapped around Ethan like armor. In Daniel's inside pocket was a small flash drive. Everything was on it. Draft files, dates, messages. Enough to tear through that armor in seconds. He hadn't slept much the night before. He had replayed every possible outcome. If he exposed Ethan today, the room would freeze. The board would demand answers. The press would pick up the story before sunset. Ethan's rise would stop instantly. Justice would be loud. But so would the damage. The lights dimmed. Ethan walked onto the stage, calm and polished. He thanked the audience, spoke about courage, about leadership, about taking risks when others hesitate. His voice was steady, but Daniel noticed that small details, the tight grip on the podium, the slight pause before certain phrases, confidence layered over pressure. Daniel listened carefully, expected anger to rise again, but what he felt instead was clarity. When the moderator opened the floor for questions, Daniel stood. A quiet ripple moved through the room. People recognized him. They remembered he had once been close to Ethan. A microphone was handed to him. This was the moment. He could feel the flash drive pressing lightly against his chest. Ethan, Daniel began, his voice calm. You talk about bold action, about stepping forward without fear. Do you believe leadership also requires accountability? The question hung in the air. Ethan looked at him, eyes sharp. For a second, neither of them moved. The room sensed tension but didn't understand its shape. Of course, Ethan replied carefully. Accountability builds trust. Daniel nodded slowly. His heart pounded, but his face remained steady. And if trust is broken, he continued, can success built on it truly last? A murmur passed through the audience. The question felt deeper now. Ethan swallowed. He understood. In that silent exchange, years of friendship passed between them. Shared meals, shared dreams. And the day it all cracked. Daniel reached into his pocket. He felt the flash drive in his hand. He imagined walking to the stage, plugging it into the presentation screen, letting the proof speak for itself. No shouting, no insults, just facts. He imagined the shock on every face. the shift in power, the apology that would follow. For a brief second, the idea felt powerful. Then he imagined something else. Going home after the chaos, sitting alone. Realizing the victory felt hollow. Knowing he had tied his name forever to that public takedown. Becoming the man who destroyed someone instead of building something better. He saw his future clearly in that moment. Two paths stretching out in front of him. One fueled by exposure. The other fueled by growth. Ethan's voice broke into his thoughts. Trust, he said slowly into the microphone, is fragile. When it's damaged, leaders must face the consequences. The admission was subtle, but real. Daniel studied. Him? For the first time since the betrayal, Ethan didn't look certain. He looked human, flawed. A man who had chosen ambition over loyalty and now carried the weight of that choice. Daniel stepped back slightly from the microphone. I agree, he said simply. Leadership without trust eventually collapses. He did not reveal the evidence. He did not say another word. He handed the microphone back and returned to his seat. The tension in the room faded, replaced by applause as the session moved forward. But something had shifted. The message had landed. It was clear enough for those who paid attention. After the event, Ethan approached him backstage. You could have ended me up there, Ethan said quietly. Yes, Daniel replied. Why didn't you? Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Because I don't want my future built on tearing someone else down. Ethan's expression tightened. Guilt, real and visible now, replaced his usual control. I was afraid, Ethan admitted. Afraid you'd wait too long. Afraid someone else would take it. I convinced myself I was protecting the idea. You were protecting yourself, Daniel said calmly. Ethan didn't argue. There was no dramatic apology. No sudden repair of friendship. Some damage cannot be undone with words. A week later, Daniel submitted his resignation. The board seemed surprised but respected his decision. He didn't explain everything. He simply said he was ready to build something of his own, and he did. He launched a small firm with a clear rule. Credit is shared openly. Ideas are protected. Trust is non-negotiable. It was slower than corporate success, harder, less glamorous, but it was honest. Meanwhile, Ethan remained in his position, yet something about his leadership changed. He became more cautious, more transparent. The quiet conversation at the summit lingered in his mind. Success no longer felt effortless. Daniel never used the flash drive, kept it in a drawer, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. Revenge had tempted him with speed and satisfaction. It had promised balance through exposure. But in the end, he realized something powerful. Revenge might win a moment. Growth wins a lifetime. When he thought back to the applause that once felt stolen, it no longer stung, 'cause he had learned the truth the hard way. The strongest response to betrayal isn't destruction. Becoming so solid, so steady, that betrayal loses its power over you. And that silence after choosing restraint. It was louder than any applause.